Hai dati temi ti che babate na via. Ma si motivata scatti temi che ripeva no ogni kama. No ogni kama.
What you questioning, Zeke? What you questioning? On the battle bus. So let's talk about two things before we do so. You guys know we start the day off here in Europe. We go over to NA East, end the day in NA West, protecting all the regions that we possibly can. And of course, we'll be crowning champions in all of those. Well, and what's going on, Pony Royale? Look, Pony Royale, look at y'all. Hey, what's up, guys? How y'all doing? You're in party right now. Throw some bananas at your favorite talent member. Can you throw bananas? Throw them from my own. Throw your there you go. Oh my god. They're your favorite. What have we caused? Hey, if you're watching as well, you should also check out watch.fortnite.com. Another great place to do the broadcast here. You're already doing it, but on watch.fortnite. And what has led us to this very moment in time, we came from 2 qualifier rounds, semifinals, and yesterday we kicked off the first day of the finals. Now we're back for another 6 matches, Levin, and these are...
Oh, I didn't mean to be on that screen.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Look, the second day of the finals is always the best time to be around. Some of the most hyped games overall. And look, let's go on to that next page. We're going to see exactly the format. If you've been here long enough, I'm sure you're used to this right now. 2 elimination points for every single elimination. Once you get to those top 24 teams, that's when those elimination points are going to start to kick in. And once you get into that 17th, then every threshold from there on out, you're going to get more and more cumulative points. So if you actually, you know, I'll spoil a little bit of the leaderboard, what it looks like. Our first place team is a 17 elimination victory royale ahead so far from first to second, right? So looking at these points, you can figure out how they managed to get that. Yeah, we're gonna touch on that trio in just a second. Really quick, we got to talk about this prize money on the line. Here is a breakdown of all the regions, but remember, we're here in Europe. Here's a breakdown: $1,000 for that trio that walks away in first place. Now, remember as well, even if your trio can't make first place, even making top 5, top 10 is vastly different than being, say, like last, right? So all these trios will be looking to try and place as high as they possibly can, because this is a life-changing amount of money on the line here. And of course, the first place trio will walk away with the Axe of Champions and look to defend that going into the next FNCS. Now we got to keep the ball rolling here. We looked at those 7 regions. We got to touch on Asia and OCE. They have champions in those regions, and it's time to crown them rightfully so. Over in Asia, we've got Zotax, a champion from Chapter 2 Season 6, excuse me, Shamoki and Swizzy.
Yeah, really great stuff from these guys. Honestly, you know, day 2, they were really, really impressive. They did enough just to clinch that first place. When I say clinch, right? Decent lead, right? Decent lead, to be fair. And it was really exciting to watch, right? I know you was watching the Asian broadcast as well. The hype from the Japanese casters is insane. Like, there's nothing that compares to it whatsoever. Be sure to go check that out if you haven't seen it already. Asia was really fun.
Yeah, it made me consider learning Japanese.
No, he
like,
back.
genuinely. So I was like, man, I was sitting watching the final game on stream earlier, and I was like, man, I wish I could understand it. I wish I could revel in the hype moment, because it just sounded so good at the same time, right? It was just such a great moment overall. That final game from there was fantastic. You know, the team we're watching right second place. I mean, there was a 55-point gap between first to second. Like, Swizzy's team up on top alongside Zokas and Shimoki dominated this region. They even won their final game, which is obviously just the icing on top of the cake with 8 eliminations. Even without that final game, they still would have managed to win the whole tournament.
Yeah, that's really the extent at which they were dominant. You know, and that feeling as well, knowing you win the last game, and like that's the culmination of how phenomenal you were over the past 12 games. Very satisfying stuff. Congratulations to them, the winners of Asia FNCS. And if we take a look at how the pricing actually breaks down for Asia as well, you can see some of the, you know, Asian traits that many of you may be familiar with if you've been paying attention to the broadcast. You know, the likes of Compelling, Rara, and Yusi, who've been really impressive over this season. Of course, Wildhook, Muffin, and Rimmer as well, who are definitely definitely one of the better known teams out of Asia. They didn't get the result they would have wanted. Of course, you always want to get first place, but top 5 isn't too bad either.
You've also got to remember that for like Moth and Rimmer and Wildhawks team, they came through the reboot style games in that second half of the semi-finals. So it's like they were the last opportunity to make it through, and they've really managed to pop off. And you know, I'm thinking when we come over to OCE, we may, or sorry, onto EU, we may see something similar. But let's throw it over to the OCE region, which is also finished. So we've crowned our champions there as well. We're going to start off with the team who ended up actually in 3rd place overall. We've got Zedox, CO, and Raikou. And these guys managed to pick up 2 victory rounds overall. You know, they were doing really good out of day 1, but they kind of slipped up a little bit onto day number 2.
Yeah, these things happen, man. It's so hard, right? Especially after having a great day 1. It can be so difficult to hold on and retain it after the second day. But a team who were looking to try and steal up first place, Vortex, Jace, Tayson, not able to do it. They are the returning champions, right? They won FNCS last season. They wanted to come and do it again. They got so close, right? 3 points behind first place, but they couldn't do it. They couldn't get that back-to-back championship. Very close though, and I'm sure they will be proud of how they did under different circumstances. Who knows? Maybe they would have been able to take it. Very fine margins, Reese.
It's tough, right? That's rough for any team, especially coming back to back. But the champions on the region, Spiker, Fab, and Kimo, man, in that final game, Kimo had such a good solo clutch. He then went live on stream and it showed the whole thing. He was super happy. And what I loved is, like, I went straight up to his stream afterwards. He was hyped up. He got the Axe of Champions instantly. He was straight into creative and he was freaking out about it, right? He was loving it. It's so good. Like, I swear, a lot of the people they love the Axe of Champions almost more than the title of winning and being a champion, and also the money.
You know, most definitely, right? Like, you see players on Twitter just like, yeah, when am I getting my Axe of Champions? Not when am I getting the prizing. Nothing about the money, nothing about the fame and the recognition. It's when do I real prizes, especially with the way Zeke hypes it up, right? How could you not want it? You can see there in first place, right? This is what I was talking about, 3 points being the difference. We expected something like this. When you looked at the standings of OCE after day 1, we knew it was going to be anybody's to take. We knew it was going to be a tight affair. It didn't disappoint. OCE was a great to watch. You know, I had to wake up really early to catch it, but it was worth it. It was incredibly worth it. OCE was really fun. Congrats to all the players who were able to steal some prize, not steal prizing, but to be able to win some prizing out of OCE.
Absolutely. Now, gents, we got to talk about EU, and we need to kind of recap some things that happened. An unprecedented score, 235 points in just 6 games on day 1 yesterday. Now, Levin, Reese, do we think this trio can kind of continue that momentum? Can they continue this reign of absolute just dominance? This ridiculously, we've never seen anything like this before performance.
Well, they'd have to have a massive blunder to not be able to do that, right? Something would have to go terribly wrong for them to not retain first place. This is a tree I'm so happy for, right? A tree that stuck together throughout the whole year. And Reese, you know, this is something I've always talked about. I was so excited at the start of the year to be able to watch trios from the start and see how they progress throughout the year. Hasn't been able to happen due to many trios splitting up and whatnot, but these guys have stuck together and they are reaping the benefits in the final big FNCS of the year where, you know, it just looks phenomenal. I don't think anything's going to change.
Yeah, and I think that's like the story arc that me and you built all year. One of the very many few teams who've stuck together all this time. And now in the final FNCS of the year, obviously before the Grand Royale, they managed to pick up first. Like, this would be such a good story. If we look at their spotlight stats from the previous day, obviously 20 plus games that they had, they lead across all regions and players, the most 20 plus games. Same, their average placement, they had the best average placement on every single region. They managed to get 0 games where they were on height. They won 2 games, 2 victory rounds, and they didn't even hold height. That's not in their play style if you watch them at all. They're a very low to mid team as well. And overall points, 235. Like, the winners from last season on the same format in EU had 295. So it's like they already have 235, 60 points behind that. It's nuts.
And we saw a team get a 60-point game yesterday, right? With the for them to just total last season's point final winning record after game 1. Like, that would be absolutely insane. But I'm really excited to see how these guys do, because I think a lot of people look at them and go, this is the low ground team. You talked about them not having height in any of those games and winning games from height. You know, that's not something we see commonly in the EU. We've seen great low ground teams in other regions. This is sort of the one team that people go, could be that great low ground team in EU. And they're finally showing that off in this competition. Really going to set, you know, a big example for a lot of the other teams. Now, anybody that wants to play low ground will be bothering these guys, right? And rightfully so, they're so good.
And I think I've talked about the story arc for them across the entire year because they are one of the only teams who've had that story arc, like we said earlier. But the story arc just this season has been great because they've looked not good, right? Well, I think we'll both happily say that they've not looked good this season when we come to their qualifiers so far. When I was looking at the predictions of them, they were contested obviously originally, but I also didn't even put them in my top 10. They today, and well, yesterday, sorry, have turned up. They've showed up. They've put on an absolute show and shown, like, we shouldn't have doubted this team at all. We should have put them up. We should have known that in every single set lobby finals like this, like, they are going to perform to the level that we should expect.
Absolutely. Let's get a bigger picture here. Let's take a look at the standings as we prepare for these games. So remember, we got another 6 foot ahead of us. But yeah, just to kind of put it in numbers off the day, right? You look from top to bottom, first to 10th. That is over 100 points. Different. All right, so there's no doubt in my mind at the end of today they will absolutely be potentially, I couldn't see them outside of top 5, but I want to see them continue I'm just like, there's really no way to properly quantify this because we've never seen this happen before. Like, it's so weird, but I'm like all for it. Let's see more of that.
Fortnite fan, when Zeke is struggling for words, something is really off the chain, right? Like, something is off the scale. It's a dazzling performance, right? It's the kind of thing that you don't see very often. These kind of things come around, very rarely. Like these sort of historic performances, I don't know if I know yesterday I was getting a bit excited and I'm saying, that's something different things, but this is definitely the kind of performance that is in the history books.
I also think with the second so far, like I mentioned earlier, a 17 elimination victory royale will be the difference between those two, right? And these guys are absolutely capable of that. It's like, when you think about all 17 elimination victory royale, aside from the single great, one team will get third, and another team with one with 15. So like, we're talking about that kind of gap between them, although having that so far ahead, it is wonder if they will. But now, 100%. And they're really showing it right now. In 5th place, like, we have to talk about also Karachi Stormy Right and Zeus are coming back champions from last season. They won 2 games and are in 5th so far. So, like, all of the points necessarily haven't been there in the other games, but like, you can't say that they're not off to like a really good form on day number 1.
Yeah, let's not sugarcoat things. People came into this, even with them being the reigning champions, sort of going, don't know if they can really do good like they did last season. Not sure if they've really been working hard enough to be able to retain the AXA champion. But they've come in and they've proven people wrong, to be fair. They've really impressed me thus far. They could have been a bit higher up in the standings if a couple other things went their way. Sometimes you do need a bit of luck on your side, but they definitely are a lot more, sort of fundamentally sound per se than I thought they would be. A lot of cohesion, the teamwork is still on point. Loving how well these guys have performed thus far. And look, will they be able to catch up to Camiseta and Teak? Not impossible, it's going to be really hard, but definitely a team to watch out for in terms of pushing into the top 3, really reaching the upper. Another team that I'm really excited about, though, Reese, a team that I think could be a threat to Camiseta and Teak on low ground. Floki, Clement, and the Sipsos, right? Yeah. This is a team who, they won the first game yesterday, right? And, very impressive stuff. Definitely a team that was always going to be showing some capacity, right? But when it comes to low ground teams in the EU, we obviously talk about Camiseta and Teak being one of the best ones. This one would also be the next one that people sort of refer to, right? This is a team that very much dominate mid and low ground. And, if these guys are having a really good day on low ground, that could be, a bit of a factor into maybe Camiseta and Teak not being able to dominate the low ground the way they did yesterday.
Yeah, like I'm expecting, like, both these teams in the same game can't necessarily win, obviously, because only one team can win, but do extremely well because they kind of hold up that same position. So I'm looking to see how those battles go today. If we move over to the next page, we'll see the teams that go from 11th currently down till 20th. A lot of teams here You know, I think they've disappointed themselves right now. I think, you know, we're looking at Taysom, Chapix, Reason a lot. In my particular, I put them in seconds to do really, really well. And you know what? They're obviously underperforming a little bit. Let's see how the game plans change today. And in 12th, I'm looking there, Queasy and Nas Thomas HD. A lot of people would have thought that these, you know, they've been contested by Nate's team in Kenny Corner, which I'm not really surprised by. That drop spot is really, really powerful. And thinking you're going to get uncontested in this kind of region is rough because it's very, very rarely like that. So for them, you know, it's tough to see them being in 12th when, you know, they could have potentially won, but it's the lay of the land.
Something I think you look at the Catty Corner fights that we typically see, these are fights that are so quick, right? It's, you know, very much dependent on your drop. If you don't have a good drop, you lose that fight. You know, we've analyzed this hundreds and hundreds of times. But the fights that we saw, at least, you know, whenever we see on the broadcast, typically, you know, more long drawn out fights, not as reliant on drop, right? The teams both taking things a bit slow, and sometimes that plays in your favor, sometimes it doesn't. And unfortunately for Queasy, it just hasn't really played into their favor, even though they are in theory one of the better teams in this lobby.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one more trio that we'll come back to that I'd like to touch on that's very similar. Really quickly, let's do a drawing board, okay? Reese, you pointed out the storm circles in games 1 through 6 yesterday. Talk to me about some of the trios that can kind of utilizing this to perform well.
Yes, this is the third zone from all 6 games yesterday. It looks like, you know, so far we've seen none of them. Maybe today is just going to be full of them. I think maybe we saved them all for NA East. Like, NA East was full of these kind of catty corner zones. But what I'm going to point out is like how that benefits some of the teams, obviously. You know, sometimes you're going to get some good zone RNG. Obviously, Cammy, being Cammy's still, he's first right now. And we both know that the zones in these third zone positions aren't the reason for their success. But overall, like, you can obviously tell that based on where their drop is, they're definitely going to have a bit of an advantage from there on out. Same with Aqua's team, who's currently in third. Like, the Boney positions, a lot of teams will be rotating past them, which obviously allows them more opportunities for surge in the early game, and they don't necessarily have to go as far, and they can spend a little bit more time looting.
Nah, I think some of the zones have been really favorable to these teams. I think a big thing to sort of almost think about is, you know, with these zones maybe not being as, you know, grueling as some others we've seen in different competitions, you'd expect actually certain teams to maybe be doing a bit better, right? Maybe you'd expect teams from the northern areas to maybe, you know, be a bit higher up in the standings, which really hasn't gone their way for the most part. But yeah, we talk about zones a lot. I think zones are very important. You know, I think maybe people rely too much on zones in terms of, you know, talking about, oh, well, we did bad because we didn't get them as well as you maybe would have thought you could. But ultimately, these are things you prepare for. You play hundreds of hours of scrims and practice to be able to understand different zones and the way they all play out. So I'm looking forward. Hopefully we don't get all, you know, 6 South zones and people can meme about that. But as the person that writes the script, I can't guarantee that won't happen. So we'll see what happens when it comes to the zones.
I want to say, like, you know, one of the last team I want to actually mention on there is like, because they're relatively central, you've got to think they're probably one of the teams who have the worst zones, right? You know, roughly the worst. Maybe Catty Corner, maybe even down in the further south, the Misty would say was worse, but like they're 5th so far, you know? They've managed to win game 4 and 5, which, as you can see, are the two kind of westmost, which, yeah, is the zones that have probably benefited them, but I don't necessarily think that's why they've won at all. They've managed to play really well through all of the remainder of the other games too, so it's like, you know, just because they're not getting that favorable zones for them, it's like you're still very easily able to perform up to top level.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about one of these trios. So we kind of touched on trios that aren't performing well, and you guys actually talked about them on the leaderboards. It's Tayson, it's Reason, it's Chapix, right? Everyone knows at this point, Tayson, Reason, names synonymous with greatness, but they haven't quite performed up to the level we would anticipate it yet. But this is a brand new day. This is a fresh start, Levin. So how do we think they could kind of change things up going into today?
Well, I think the big thing is when you look at this trio, right, is at any given day, either one of these guys could be called the best player in the world, and you believe it. And not a lot of trios, even not a lot of the top trios, have that same privilege. But you can see in moments like this, they aren't clicking. Things are sort of falling apart. Things weren't working yesterday. The identity of this trio seemed to be lost. And I think they very much understand that. They very much have worked on that. I've spoken to Reason. He said he VOD reviewed for 5 hours. I don't know where he found the time to VOD review for 5 hours after yesterday. But he said that they said that they're going to switch things up in terms of their play style and what they actually do when it comes to strategically rotations, all of these things. And so I'm one of them in day 2 because this is a team that many people expected to do much better. You know, I know, Reese, you had them predicted at 2nd place, right? So they should be doing a lot better.
Yeah, you know, I'm looking for it in day 2. I'm looking for the comeback. There's 6 games total. It'll be rough for them to see if they can try and pick up like a first overall, because obviously they are exactly middle way basically throughout the leaderboard so far. So it will be tough to see them have such a huge comeback. But like you mentioned, like they are an all-star team. Like they're a team that has full potential players, like you mentioned, be the best in the world. And we often see these teams not necessarily working out so well when it comes to these lobbies because they don't fill the roles that they necessarily need to.
Yeah, and I think the big thing will be, sort of that bounce back in the mentality, right? The biggest fear in any given tournament, especially across multiple days, is can you reset mentally? Yeah, yesterday was rubbish, but can we come back tomorrow and actually fight hard and build off of the foundation? You've spent the whole season working hard to get to this point. There's no point giving up now, right? You got to go out there and perform to the best you possibly can. And I hope the rumors that maybe they'll be contested at Craggy Cliffs today. Don't want to believe anything yet. We'll see. I'm guessing a couple minutes because the time will soon be upon us. But I really am optimistic about these guys doing better. We've seen it before. Last season, Anderlecht had a stinky day one, did much better day two, right? So it's never out of the realms of possibility. I'm going to be rooting for these guys.
Yeah, sometimes we do see trios like that. Like, because there's a 2-day format, they tend to do better on one of the 2 days, right? Sometimes it's better day one, then they kind of play catch up day two, and vice versa, right? So I think you're right, and I really want to see them perform well, right? They've already made it. That's why we're here at all. But now it's like, can they perform at the level that we anticipated, right? Now, really quickly, we have a minute and a half before we go. Let's talk predictions before we jump on the bus. So these are the trios we think will take all of it home. Levin, Durag, Lev, you started us off. Queasy, Anas, and Tom Stage D.
Yeah, and obviously we discussed why this prediction hasn't maybe played out. I really am interested to see how these catty fights look in the next 6 games. But, I still got to give them their credit. Over the course of the season, they've been phenomenal, and hopefully today can be a good bounce back for them.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see Nate's team drop down to the south side because realistically it's not been working out for them either. But let's have a look at Anderlecht's 4-0 X-Squeeze. So far in the top 10, we've already mentioned yesterday multiple to second day. So let's see if that comes through for them. Rashayo's Picky's going to Accuracy or after Strokey, who are currently sitting in 3rd place, which is, I mean, realistically, Chaz been on point with the predictions the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Shai is really, I don't know what he's doing. Maybe he's the one writing the scripts, right? He clearly knows more than I do. Sundown's gone with Pink, Nebs, and Stompy, who are sitting in 11th. They obviously did incredibly well last season. A team that works very hard. They prepare well. Hopefully today can be a bit of a better day where they can push themselves into that top 10.
It's a new day, Levin. It's a brand new set of 6 games. Whatever happened yesterday, let that wash off. Today, it is time to leave your mark on history as a trio. And let's see which of these trios can really pull out stops. And again, that keep yourselves focused on target, and we'll see how things end up. But you heard the battle bus. It means we're kicking off day number 2 of the finals. After 6 games, we'll know who the new trios champions is. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I'm so excited. Let's go hang out with Sundown and Shia to kick off the day.
Thank you so much, Zeke, Levin, and now Acts of Champions in 3 regions, and EU is going to kickstart the action yet again here on day 2. My name's Sundown, joined by Shao to call all the action.
You can't even
Absolutely,
watch
Sundown.
this,
Day 1 gave us a story we haven't really seen in EU.